Sometimes I discover that as I'm preparing a homily, I'm looking at the text of all the readings, and I look at them long enough until I get kind of a sense of what I want to say about these, but then we're always encouraged to go and research it as well among some of the scholars and so forth. And these three readings I just kept staring at and said, nothing's happening. And finally, it did reveal itself. That aha moment happened. And it's simple as saying to you, when we talk Epiphany, we could be talking little epiphanies or grand epiphanies. And what I discovered is Epiphany, as used in these readings, as used on this story of Jesus, is wider and broader than we think. The Epiphany can take on almost a laser-like beam and point you to right a particular spot, like the star did for the kings. It's here, here's the child. Or the Epiphany can be as wide as a sunbeam coming down from that great sun, and it seems to bathe us in its light. For example, just to use one little incident from the scriptures I hear a lot. A lot of people have been told, because people say, it's in the scriptures. And it's in the scriptures that God has a plan for me. Really? It's in the scriptures. Yes, it says, I have plans for you, says God. I said, okay, I didn't know, but that's a lot of plans spread out over the world. Let's go back and look at that. Let's see it in context. Let's look at the original language, and you find out that God is talking to a nation, not an individual. I have plans for you, and I have plans for you, and I have plans for you, and I have plans. I have plans for you, O Israel, O people of God. I have plans for you as a nation, as a community. The scriptures, after all, came out of a community and are often read in the context of being a community. And so we might think it has that little laser light kind of, it's all about me and God's plan for me, which you'll probably never know if you've got it right or not. But what about the plan as it comes in that context? And that's what we see unfolding in these readings. It starts with Isaiah, and this is interesting because you get two stories of these kings, these wise men. One is a prediction, or a prophecy, better said, by Isaiah, who says, "O Jerusalem, your day is coming. Your day is coming when you will be the grandest of all. Your children shall return home. Your crops will grow. It'll be a wonderful, everybody will be coming to see the great Jerusalem. And yes, they will come from the east. The dromedaries, the magi, they will come bearing gold, frankincense, and myrrh." That's back in the Old Testament. That reference to Jerusalem and what Jerusalem can be. Now you have to understand too, as I was reminded, that you remember the Jews, most of them were waiting for a Messiah, but they wanted a military Messiah. They wanted somebody that came in with a lot of troops and a lot of weapons to put down their enemy, to put down Rome. But that's not what showed up. And so it wasn't Jerusalem that was going to be the grand breakthrough of an epiphany. For when we turn now into the gospel, we find that it's a different kind of epiphany. It's almost that laser light. And it's not about Jerusalem being the place. It's going to be about a child. Well, who ever heard of that? Who would pick the lowliest child? And then you go back and you read about David when they were looking for somebody to be the new king. And he was the youngest son, so his dad said, "Don't even bother going for the tryouts. Just stay here because you're too young. God would never choose the likes of you." And of course, the prophet comes and he interviews all of the brothers, and he hears his voice saying, "It's none of them." He said, "Do you have another child?" "Well, yeah, he's the youngest guy. He's out to take care of the sheep. That's the best we could do for him right now." And get him. Why him? Why a child in Bethlehem? A small town, the least of all. That's how the Epiphany comes. It comes in moments and when we least expect it. It came for St. Paul that way in that second reading. He's the one who finally discovered. Now remember, he was a Pharisee. A Pharisee's Pharisee. He was well schooled. He loved his faith so much we know he went out and persecuted those following Jesus. But when he was converted, when he had his own epiphany, which occurred coming out of darkness, because Paul was, yes, thrown to the ground, but also blinded. And so he had to be led by the hand. And as he was led by the hand, from that darkness, he began to discover who Jesus was, never having met him, but named to know about this Jesus so much so that now he has a wider epiphany. And he says to his people, I have come to discover that this Christ is for the Gentiles as well. Oh my God. You must be kidding us. Why would you say such a thing? Because I've come to discover that this Messiah didn't come just for the Jews, but for the world, for all the Gentiles, for all of us. Now that should have been good news, but not for Herod. Because Herod heard about a king, and the people heard about a king, and they got worried because they wanted to know who the new king of Jerusalem was going to be. And he says, yes, you go and find the child, and then you'll come back and tell me so I can come and worship him with a sword. And when he couldn't find the right one, well, you all know the story of the innocents who were killed. Because this king was worried that he was losing his little kingdom. And when Paul and others were discovering a wide kingdom. I remember a teacher saying something in a workshop one time, and at first we heard it, we said, what? And it wasn't longer, it caught us. He said, you have to remember, Jesus didn't come to start another religion. He came to break open the kingdom of God, which is everywhere, and to show us that kingdom. But it's so hard to find it, isn't it? It's so hard to find it because we see so much of the darkness. We enjoy the epiphanies we see in our parishes and families. We enjoy the people we love. But then we open the newspapers, we listen to the news, and we say, will we ever stop dividing ourselves up? There was a funny cartoon in the Post this week, I think it was this morning. Somebody's trying to explain to a new member in St. Louis about how St. Louis is laid out. And he's reading all of this. You know, well, some of us are divided into little bitty places, and then there's St. Louis County, which is different than the city of St. Louis. Okay, that's different. It goes on, and you think, how did that ever happen? People kept trying to get away from other people. We'll find our own little place. And now, what are we up to, 90 or something like that? 90 different little spaces? We say, can we ever come together? Oh, no, we can't think of that. We never would dream of that. And so we live in a very divided place. But here's what I wish for you. I wish it, as I wish it for myself, that each of us, not necessarily discover a plan God has for us, but to discover the kingdom in the strangest and most delightful of places that you didn't expect. That was an epiphany moment for you. I had two last month. One was a repetitive one. It's when I get to go to the bread company and sit for an hour and a half with my good Baptist minister friend. We've become very close. And he's not an active minister because, you see, he loves talking to Catholic priests. And that doesn't make his community feel very comfortable. It's like Herod saying, what are you doing? What are you doing? And he knows a number of our priests now, and he has lunch with us. And you know what? We never find a difference in what we believe. Never. He has a lot of questions. We have a lot of questions. And then this past week, when we had a funeral for one of our parishioners, one of whose daughters went and somewhere in her life joined the Muslim religion. The first group I met coming in the door, they arrived early, was the Muslim family from the East Coast. I thought, oh gosh, what do we do with this? How do I welcome them? How do I explain the Mass? What am I going to do with this? And I met him. He was the nicest man. He said, Father, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. You don't have to worry about us. We've been to churches and Christian churches before, so we're okay. And after Mass, they were standing in that aisle. And I came back from taking off my vestments. We had the nicest talk, finding out their children, what colleges they were going to, and the father himself had just gotten his doctorate. We start talking, and I happened to mention Pope Francis. And he said to me, now there's a man the world needs. I thought, oh, even he recognizes who we have as a pope and sees goodness there for everybody, for the epiphany of the world. And then I mentioned some articles I read about so many Muslim women going and taking to the streets to try to tell other people, don't judge us by the terror you see. That is evil. And then he said, yes, indeed, it is darkness. And we cannot identify with them, for they are not Muslim. They are dangerous people. And I thought, I'd like to talk to you more about this. It was an epiphany of where people are in this life. That the kingdom of God is bigger than we thought. And we who can find Jesus in bread and wine ought to have our eyes, ears, and hearts open to so many other places where we meet them. Because you see, the kings left to go home by another way. And the way is what the early Christians were called, people of the way of the Christ. And that's the way we hope to journey. And on that journey, may we be blessed with some epiphanies that broaden our souls, our minds, our hearts. For God did not just send Jesus to start another organized religion, but to reveal the kingdom of God in our midst.